Government has had brownfield grants. That's difficult. We need to keep our eyes and ears open for that. And that's another part of our environmental specialist. I want her to have eyes and ears on what's available for brownfields. We need to do something about this. This is, what a corner there, what an anchor up there. So yes, I want to deal with this, but we need to look at public-private partnerships.
I believe there was an opportunity some years ago for a Walmart to come into that site, and Walmart had agreed to clean up the site at their cost. It was voted down by the city commission, and I believe by the commissioner who sat in Newtown at the time, who represented Newtown at the time. To answer your question specifically, no. No, I don't think the city should be putting city money into cleaning up that site. With Suzanne, again, a public-private partnership is possible, but I don't believe the government is the solution to everything. Let the government create the tools that make it easier for the private sector to invest in that area. That, to me, is the solution.
I think I would make every effort to find funding, but I think in further deliberation about this, I was asked this question yesterday, and my response was yes, because I think it's so important. And I think in thinking that through with a little more realization, that I'd have to also say, not if it's only the city providing that funding to do it. I think we need to look at the county for help, but I think there can be other foundations and other funding sources, and I think we should make every effort we can to find those funding. But to just blanket, take it out of the general fund, I don't believe that that's responsible.
Well, I definitely think there should be the political will to try to clean it up with or without development. Now, it will be irresponsible for me to say yes, not knowing what the cost and to clean up that brownfield.
1 to 7 million.
How much?
1 to 7 million.
1 to 7 million. Having said that, I do believe I would rather see someone else come in and pay the expense to do that. But I've heard that it is possible that we could look for grants or type of funds to do that, and I think we should make every effort to do that. Ideally, we do want someone to be there to provide economics. I wish Walmart paid better wages, but I think it would be better than no, and I think it would have attracted other businesses there. But having said that, I think the best thing is to have something that's going to generate money in our community. Thank you.
Thank you. And since Barbara is sitting in for Susan Chapman, who's not here, I'm assuming that I'm quite qualified. Okay, you want to respond to that?
As being part of the redevelopment of this community and work with that Walmart that we thought that we had brought in here, also our present city commissioner was a part of the beginning of the problem with the field. The fact is that the city and the county use that field as a dump. It is the city and the county's responsibility jointly to get that brownfield cleaned up. There is, I forget how much now, but we will find out, there were funds set aside for part of that cleanup. And the clear fact of the matter for Newtown, if we are ever going to get any real economic development in here, Mary Anderson Brownfield does have to be cleaned. Once that field is clean, there is no doubt that you will get redevelopment on it. But it is the city and the county's responsibility.
Thank you.
Can I just take 2 minutes of the question? Man, can we just talk after? You tell me what you.
Okay, Ed. Yeah, question?
Yes. The city is less than a decade away from bankruptcy. If you don't do something to get a handle on the unfunded pension benefits of police and fire. Every commissioner, and I suppose every candidate knows, what will you do to get a handle on those unfunded pension benefits of police and fire?
Every
ago, I said something about core government functions. These are things like water, sewer, roads, police, schools, things like that, fire protection. You identify the core government functions. We actually don't have a formal list, but we need to make one. Put this list here. Then you find out everything else the government is doing. They've got a big book of the budget. It's got pages and pages of numbers, and it lists the departments. It doesn't say what the department is doing with that money that they're getting. So we don't have a quick reference as to what the government's spending its money on. But we need to develop that. Okay, once we have that, all is here, make sure the stuff up here is funded. I get 1 minute?
1 minute for these questions.
Oh, wow.
All right. All right.
Talk to me after if you're interested.
I'm very pleased with the present commission last year's budget. I think we kind of held a little bit of a standard for a lot of municipalities in the country that we went to define contribution for the general employees. And that was actually well received. That was a powerful thing that we did. With the police pensions, we made changes. We kept their defined benefit. There will be more negotiations on that in the future. But we dealt with their COLA. We dealt with their spousal benefits and a lot more that I could go into that would take too long. Yes, we do have probably $250 million in unfunded liability. And we are looking at this over the next 30 years. It has been kicked the can down the road for much too long. Now, the solution could be three parts. Are we going to cut more staff? We've cut staff by almost 28% in the past 4 or 5 years. We're at bare bones. We could increase the millage. We just learned recently that in the millage, we have to increase that maybe by 10%. Going to the rollback won't work so much this time. It did last year. We had a wonderfully flat budget. Using the revenue stabilization funds, we may have to go into that. That'll affect your bond rating. We've got a bunch of choices here. Taxes equal services. It's a real serious issue and it will take a lot more time. Thank you.
It is a very difficult issue because you're negotiating with people who have a deal, who base their lives on a deal, particularly the police force, and who have relied on these pension benefits. You have to understand the police don't get Social Security. As part of the negotiation of their package many years ago, they gave up the right to Social Security, so it was never funded for. I think there are two ways to address the issue specifically on the police force. I think we have to look at creating a new deal for those officers who aren't vested, who are not entitled to the old deal yet. I think there's an 8-year vesting period. We have to come up with a new plan for them that isn't as rich. And I've spoken to many officers. I think there is recognition on the part of the officers and recognition on the PBA to do that. The other thing we have to do is tweak some of the existing conditions of the officers who are fully vested. There are areas where we can tweak. Are we going to solve a $150 million or a $200 million problem? No. But we will set up something for the future, and we'll try to do what we can for the present.
There's no question that the unfunded liabilities are a large problem, and the city has taken steps to make some changes. There's still going to be some steps that need to be taken. Those challenges are going to be hard, and the decisions are going to be really tough. I was pleased at a recent forum that I listened to the city manager, and this is what he said about the basic where the city stands relative to their financial stability. The balance accounts are solid, the bond rating is solid, and the infrastructure is solid. So he used the word that the city is stable, recognizing that there are some challenges, there are some issues that are going to have to be met, and the commissioners are going to have to make some very tough decisions.
Yeah, well, clearly the city's doing okay now, but it's down the road that this next commission has to be very concerned about. As been said earlier, the police budget is the lion's share of the general fund, and we've got to find some answers. We've been able to attract a lot of people to our police department because the benefits are so great. But however, somehow, the question in my mind that the commission has to ask itself is, how do we stop the bleeding? I don't believe that we should retroactively take benefits from any existing officer. If you decided to work for a job and they promised you that, and you take it away, I think all of us would be fighting that. But clearly, we have to do something going forward. We have to make some changes. I don't know if there's any other way to stop the bleeding. But even if we did change benefits for existing police officers come in, that still wouldn't solve all the problems. There's still some other things that the city has to do. I believe we've got to grow our way out. One of the candidates gave me a sheet. It was a question that came up, and out of courtesy of how much tax revenue the city gets from business and how much from residential. Residents pay, I believe, 74% or 75% of the taxes. Business only a small percentage. So what that tells me is that, in my opinion, I believe that business ought to take more of the burden off of the taxpayer to add so that we can meet these obligations, because we can't continue to cut our way out. Okay, I'm sorry.
Yes. The city has a significant unfunded pension liability that threatens to consume our entire budget. We must resolve this issue by converting our pension plan to defined contributions as opposed to defined benefits, to defined benefit plan. This is the model that government and private businesses are adopting because defined benefit plans are not sustainable. We must face this change to consider the needs and expectation of those employees nearing retirement. This change will not resolve our budget issues. We must look to consolidate duplicate services with Sarasota County, city residents, or county taxpayers. As well, we deserve our fair share of county services and other departments cost effective. I'm sorry, I suffer from Del Posse. I get a little bit, so. Although the city beginning to recover from the recession, we must avoid the boom and bust economy that has contributed to our downturn. We must diversify our economy by facilitating the growth of local businesses.
Thank you. We don't have time for any more questions, or do we?
7 o'clock.
We're getting it set.
It's 7.
Oh, okay.
Questions about how we elect our commissioners in Sarasota, what that means to us. Before 1979 local voting rights lawsuit, all city commissioners were elected at large. In the 10 elections before the lawsuit, African American candidates made the runoff 7 times, but none were ever elected. Nobody talks about the fact that the lawsuit did not change these elections. In fact, in the 7 at-large elections since the lawsuit, we've done worse. No African American candidate has even made the runoff. Most people know that the main reason the city holds its elections in March is to shrink the electorate, so that a smaller number of people get to decide what happens to the rest of us. I know candidate Susan Chapman is on record with supporting these slow turnout elections. I'd like to hear what the other candidates think, whether they agree that this is okay, that so few voters decide fate of the rest of us.
Do you understand the question?
I think so.
Does he understand the question?
Did you just ask me if I understand?
I think it's a little confusing.
Is that your answer?
No, I wanted to clarify. You going to clarify a little bit?
What would you like to know?
Well, you've got something in here about at-large elections, and then you've got something about African Americans, and then you've got some statistics about how many times African Americans made the runoffs, but then none of them were elected in the runoffs. And I don't know what you
That was
about
a
it.
300 class. Let me try the 100 class. All he's asking is, would you be in favor of moving the election from March to November?
Oh, that I understand.
That's 100 class. That was the 400 class over there.
Whether they agree that it's okay that so few voters decide the fate of so many.
Well, all of the voters can vote. They don't vote because they choose not to vote. And well, they can come to the election. They all can. They can come in November. They can come in March. So I don't see an issue there that the city has to change. I think the voters maybe should come to the election.
All right, thank you. Does everybody understand? Okay, Suzanne, how would you respond?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting, over the past 4 years, governing for 4 years and looking, I agree. I think there's this balance between, we have ridiculous turnout in March elections. Look, at the outset, I would love to move the local elections to November. We need to enfranchise a lot more people to vote in November. Look what happened in the last national election in November. Look at that. Look at the end of the ballot on the last election. I think what happens in these March elections, and I know they've been going on forever, it's bad turnout. It's special interest sometimes. There's more room for disenfranchisement. It just doesn't. It's time to change it. I'm concerned about what's going to happen in 2 weeks here with the vote. What kind of vote we're going to get here. And absolutely, I want to look at, we need to change that.
Thank you.
I think anybody who participates in this sort of a cynical scheme to suppress votes really doesn't deserve the vote of anybody. Anybody who believes we're all created equal, they should not vote for anybody who supports this scheme. Unlike Ms. Chapman, I would do everything I can to ensure that we get the greatest number of voters out. All of my signs, you see them all over town, they say vote March 12th. I'm trying to let people know, come out and vote. I think it serves the purposes of a very small group of power brokers who want to keep their power in. We've seen it in the small turnouts in the vote, but we've seen it, it's allowed them to affect our whole form of government. It's allowed them to control those who they put in. It's allowed them to control the dialogue of how we spend our money, how we put in a Walmart or not put in a Walmart. It is all pervasive that this very, very small group of people seek to control a very great number of people. So, how can we possibly allow 6,000 voters to control what 53,000 people want to do in this city? Sorry.
I would absolutely support changing the election from March to November. I'm a common sense candidate, and to me, it's just common sense. But then you can also add to that the money that it's going to save the city. Now, I was of the understanding from meetings that I've been to that it was about $100,000 savings. And someone the other day said something to me, they thought it was closer to $200,000 to have a standalone election in March as opposed to having it in November. So to me, it just makes common sense. There shouldn't even be any questions.
Yeah, I agree. I've never understood why the election was in March. Clearly, Sarasota's turnout in voting, I believe probably 70% in November. And I encounter people every day who don't even know there is an election in March. And so, and to me, and I don't even, of course, the savings, that's another added reason, but to me, it's just voter turnout. And so, so part of my job, I think maybe all of our jobs have been more challenging. Let people know it's March 12th. It's such an off-cycle time. And so I believe it would get greater attention, and the election of the commission would be totally different. But even if it wasn't, that's not the point. It's a matter of voter participation to me. So to me, it's a no-brainer for me.
This question came up at the 10-year charter review. This is one of the most important elections locally. And our job as citizens is to educate our local citizens so that they know how important it is to turn out for this election. So I feel that this election, we do need to have this election stay as it is because it is our local election. We know what a disaster it was for the ballot this year in November because it was just entirely too much on there. So and as I say, we addressed this at the charter review. And Ms. Chapman and I stand strongly in this opinion that we do need to leave this election here where it is because it is locally. It's our job as citizens to start educating our local citizens so that they understand the importance of them really coming and electing these people, because they are the ones that's governing us.
There are dollars that comes to this city and county from the government. How will you make sure that Newtown gets its fair share, being that Newtown has so often been neglected when those dollars come to our city?
You want everybody on?
Everybody.
Well, if something comes earmarked to Newtown, then it should go directly to Newtown. Now, if something comes to the city, then we'd have to determine what Newtown's share is. Do you have a figure in mind? A percentage?
No, but
Well, yeah, see, we probably should get that percentage, and I'd be open to hearing what it was. And if we can all agree on that percentage, then yes, of course.
We have done a lot, obviously in Newtown, and I will say that again, but we need to look, as we move along, and I've said this with all the Janie Poe, and Valerie, we've talked about this many times, and I'm on board with all this, and I know you ask this question a lot, that to be an advocate, that money comes in here, you bet. We've done a lot so far, a lot of it's government money, housing authority. I don't have to tell you all this. I think you're ahead of the game on that, but you just need to know that absolutely, this is critical to this part of the community. All the things that we've said about job creation, all the things we've said about housing, absolutely. And you know, I'm not sure how much more I can say that I am an advocate, and that CRA money, all that, absolutely on board with that.
I mentioned earlier my desire to make sure CRA money is spent up here. All I can tell you is I will do what I can to make sure the CRA's fund money is evenly distributed. In terms of government money, whether it be federal money, state money, you know, many of this money is awarded for specific projects, for specific purposes. FDOT is looking at, putting in roundabouts on the North Trail. When you apply for grants, these grants are awarded for specific reasons. So I think there has to be more proactivity on the part of Newtown to lobby our grant writing people in our city hall to apply for more things that would benefit Newtown. Again, it's difficult to steer money to one particular place if it is